Alright, well, it's Monday night, not Sunday. I was hoping to get this fired up yesterday, but weather was gorgeous and decided to putz around on the lake for 2 days. So it is Saturday, Sunday out on the water. Went swimming, enjoyed the last hot, warm. Still gonna have decent weather for motorcycles and cars and things like that, but for boating, wanted to enjoy that. So this got put on pause. Also, Justice that owns this is not even back in town until probably midnight tonight, so he'll be up at the shop tomorrow. But I did go ahead and start putting some of this stuff back together without having the camera on. I didn't do a whole lot, but just kind of noodling around. We're down to that final little bit. So the motor's freshened up, primary's done, everything else is hooked up. Brake stuff is all mounted and still sealed. I never separated these. I put the timing advanced unit back in and the Dyna S magnetic pickup back in, so that's underneath the bolt. Really not that complicated. There's probably a million videos on Evo Sporty stuff, so I didn't feel like having to go through. There's no points to adjust, there's no setting of anything other than I don't have the bolts in for this plate, so we still have to time it. I'll probably bring you guys along when we go to do that. But on the pickup itself, the timing advance, it's the same as a points setup. There's one pin that goes into the number 2 cam. It's keyed. Put your advance on, make sure that roll pin's not sheared off. I've had that happen more times than I would ever like to admit. On the bike, on the side of the road, all of these things. Anytime I've ever had an ignition problem, 90% of the time it was that crappy timer advance. Stainless, nicer ones or cheapo $20, $30 repop ones. The pin has been the issue, not the actual weights themselves, in my experience. I'm sure there's tons of other people that have had other issues, but the roll pin shears off or busts out or gets smushed or something along those lines. So got this just roughly laid in, nothing's timed. Got the coil wires hooked back up top. So we just need some spark plug wires. Coil's on, it's not final torqued, so it's still got a little bit of flex here that we gotta tighten down. On this side, brake is on. I put the brake lever and the pin and stuff back in, which is gonna kind of actually suck when I go to put the chain back on. Didn't do that yet, but we got it in neutral in case I wanted to fire it up. Carb is bolted back on. On an Evo, there's no weird O-ring on this side. The carb literally slides into the manifold. And on this one, being a earlier one, the breather is down here. So I'm just going to leave this breather hose dangling. We can reroute that and clean that up later, or we can duct it back up to the intake whenever we get around to putting the rest of this stuff on. But realistically, as it sits right now, if I click the key onto the first position, tail light goes on, tap the brakes. Look at that, working brake lights. Didn't lose any brake fluid out of the master when I had it all apart, which is why this little cover kind of stayed in the frame as I was rolling it around. No headlights still, because I stole it for the fire bike that's sold now, so I got a ton of headlights over on the back corner of that bench. We'll get around to that at some point, but I'm pretty confident that this will run. I got bikes everywhere, sorry. Super glide's real close to the bench right now. So here's kind of where we're at. Brakes are hooked up and working on the rear. Front brake line is hooked up. I do not have the right banjo bolt washers for that, so we're gonna have to get some banjo bolt washers and we'll bleed the front brakes before this leaves, so we can at least have that. It will not have a working brake light from the front switch, but it will have working brakes. Just, I asked and he didn't want to run a wire down the bar. If we need to, we will. We'll kind of see how that goes, but that's roughly where we're at. Got all the ignition stuff hooked up. I'm gonna run the coil wires, leave the plugs out, crank it over, make sure she's sparking. Put the hodgepodge, it's a Dyna S, so it's really not overly complicated. Basically points with an extra wire. The only difference between a Dyna S and points is you do need a hot side lead. And if memory serves, don't quote me on this because this is not a thorough how-to video by any means, but I believe I have a red lead right here, which goes to the blue wire on the Dyna S. This is my ignition. This runs up into the key switch, so when I click the key on, I get 12 volts to here on the red wire, which then goes to the blue wire, down to the ignition unit. The white wire should be your, oh, no, maybe not. Maybe it's the white wire. I don't remember. Google Dyna-S ignition, there's a million videos. Not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but I have one red lead. The blue, I think, is trigger. White is the powered lead. Looking at this now, because I see the split right here. So I got the white wire from the coil back to here, which bridges into the Dyna-S down below, but it's also tapped into a hot lead right here. Here's my keyed source, the thicker one. This should just be a trigger wire on the red side. We're gonna redo all of the wiring on this at some point, but quick little update for you. I was hoping to get this fired up this weekend. I missed out because I was on a boat. It happens. Hopefully you've been following along with this. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button, get all the updates. The goal is now to get this running at some point this week. Week's already filling up, and we got Walnut Swap coming up in 2 weekends. And we're trying to get the Falcon up to the drag strip. We're gonna go up to Great Lakes, hopefully next weekend, probably Sunday. So trying to get that solidified. I gotta run it over to the alignment shop, get that aligned if they'll do it this time. They didn't last time because the frame was rusted. Go figure. I re-welded everything on the frame. Now we got upper ball joints, lower control arms with brand new ball joints, new springs, so it sits like a monster truck. I can't really rebuild that much more on the front end, so we'll see what they say. I'll keep you guys updated later on in the week, but as of right now, Evo is on pause for the next day or two. I want to get this fired up on the bench before I hook up everything else. In theory, we already went through the carb. This thing ran great before it decided to not lubricate the cylinder walls and eat the pistons. But it makes good compression. It turns over really strong. As long as that carb isn't gummed up, we should be in pretty good shape. So it is the next day. Did not get anything else done on this, but I think where I left off, if I remember correctly, it's been all of an entire night. Got the carb stuff situated, coil is on. I did snug all of these down, so the coil's fixed on here now. Got it rough wired, these are snugged down. Carb is hooked up, minus the fuel. Oh, I forgot to grab the gas tank from the shop. Whoops, oh well. This cable needs to be replaced on the throttle. This has been a little bit on the loose side, so I got probably 1/4 inch of play. I'm all the way adjusted out on the adjuster, and the little pinches are busted on the housing itself, so we'll need a new throttle cable, which I think I have in that cardboard box somewhere, but we don't need that for now. This cover is just roughly on. I'm gonna snug up this lower bolt just in case we run these 1/4-20 regular bolts. For now, I need to get the, what do we have to do here? I need to get the chain on. Not that it really matters, but I'd like to have that hooked up before we get any further. And on the primary, we have the foot peg, shifter, everything else. And I'll run the spark plug wires down, hook this up to the old spark plugs, make sure we are getting spark. That's what we're gonna check first, actually. It is, battery's charged, everything else is good. We don't have a headlight. Maybe I'll steal this one. We'll see. I have parts to slap it together if we need to, so shouldn't be too big of a deal, but I think we're gonna try and fire this thing up tonight. So in order to do that, I'm gonna put the plugs and wires in first. We'll do a quick spark check, and then we gotta time the thing. Then we'll come over to this side. I'll pull the brake stay, get the chain hooked up, put the sprocket cover back on, and then we'll do the exhaust. Then we'll start trying to plumb in fuel to here. Hopefully I have gas in a can over there. Just cut the grass yesterday and used most of it, I don't remember. We should have enough to fill the bottle and at least light it off. And then we should be in pretty good shape. I could just slap it together and fire it up if I do the pipes first, but the pipe mount is also on this cover, so I want to make sure this is all solidified, which is easier to get the chain on with that loose. So we'll do that first. Dogs are out here now with me going crazy, so let's get set up and get jamming away on this thing. It's kind of tight quarters on this side of the bike, but we got some spark plug wires. So we'll hook these guys up to the coil. Just press fit in, not that complicated. And I believe, hopefully if I remember correctly, this is all wired up proper. I got somebody looking at the house right next to me, so let me make sure the dogs don't try and jump over the fence real quick, and I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Got some potential tenants next door, I guess, asking questions that I can't answer. I don't own it. So we're gonna do a quick spark check. All I'm gonna do is drop the plugs in here. Plugs are out, so the motor will turn over freely. Don't remember where I'm at in editing or how many videos are before this, but we did cycle this over, crank the motor over until we got oil pressure back up here. And we're running a Dyna S. Oh, I can't even do this until I get the thing timed. That's probably a good place to start. My bad. Getting ahead of myself. That's why I hate slapping stuff together rather quickly like this and stopping at weird points. I like doing everything at once because it makes it much easier to get everything back together. So, get our tool ready to put the timer plug back in, and now I gotta figure out how to crank this over. Let's see if we can get lucky on the starter, I guess. Pull these so I don't shock myself. All right, there's the dot. We'll just do this off the starter, hopefully. There's compression. This is gonna be hard. Change my mind. Let's hook the chain up first. It's gonna make this part a lot easier. On the other side of the bike now. Forgot to click the camera on, but I fished the chain through the sprocket cover. So we'll loop this around. This is an O-ring chain. I don't remember. I think we had this rough adjusted, but we'll kind of figure that part out, right? Yeah. So we're in pretty good shape here. Hopefully, we can get this to lay out close enough where it kind of lets me put the master links in. So chain is now roughly back on. And I grab the master links. This isn't that bad. I'm just gonna drop a master link back in here first. I don't really care about the O-rings right at this current second. This is adjustable or changeable later on if need be. So I'll give this some stretch, loop this over, and I'm gonna have to go to the bottom side, I think. Trying to do this without having to readjust the axle. If I need to, we can. Come on, give me enough. It's so close. So close. This would not be that hard if you just loosen the tensioners a little bit. There we go. So I just locked this over here on the teeth. I don't know if you can see that, but there we go. And we'll drop our link over. Like so. And then we'll throw our master link on. Why did I put this in a magnetic tray? That wasn't very smart. Grab some needle nose here. There we go. Now our chain's on. That's gonna help me time this thing. I'll go back to the other side. Now we're back on the other side. What we need to do is get our shifter on here. I don't know where this is gonna land, but we'll get this bolt in. There's my ball sockets. Where are my tools? This is what happens when I didn't clean up the other night like I was supposed to. All of my stuff is scattered about everywhere. That's all right. Let's do this the easy way. I'll set this in a spot that's easy to adjust or take on and off for now. Instead, just to get everything kind of buttoned up, and then we're gonna have a million adjustments on this moving forward. At least on the shifter shaft. That grabbed. Now, foot peg, I don't need that yet, but chain's in, so now we are in gear. So I'm in first right now, which is not really where I want to be for timing. Click that back up to first. Half a click for neutral, right there. Second, third, and fourth. Starting fourth, it makes it a lot easier to turn over. Neutral. Give this a quick little crank. There's our compression stroke. Just clipped there. All right. On Evos, we are now at the line, which puts us right here. I'm using a screwdriver on this side right now, just to kind of feel where that piston's at. Quick check if you want. There's the dot, which is 40-degree advance. So I think we're going to time off the advance mark. So if that's at the 40-degree advance mark right now, this is where we actually want the magnet to fire on the timing side. So let's go over here. I guess if I was fancier, I'd put a little light here so you guys could see better what we're doing. But let's get this roughly set up. Should be kind of close. Let me throw these in. I'm not tightening these down yet, but I am just going to get them started so they're close to ready. But we'll get these started on the ignition. Get this breather out of the way. Maybe. Start by hand, because these things are very small on the threads. I think it's like an 8, maybe a 10. This is way too small of a screwdriver to use for this, but we're just getting these close to seated. Not tightening anything yet. Okay. Now, here is what we are trying to do. I can click this on and cue this up till the fire mark, or if I wanted to get real fancy, I can just grab a test light and rotate this around until the point's actually open. I don't know if I have my test light, so for right now, just because I'm kind of close, I'm going to throw some plugs in here. It is a dual fire on this Dyna S, which means when it sparks on one, it sparks on both. So I'm going to drape the spark plug wire over here. And we're going to turn the ignition on and see if we can get any sparky sparks. Probably should have marked this and made it a little easier on myself. Okay, so right now, just a quick rough one. Ignition's on, spark is grounded onto the cylinder head bolt right here. If I move the advance now, I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah. So nothing there. We want to time that to full advance, and this is where a timing light would come in handy. So what I'm going to do is come back down here. I'm going to snug this up just a hair. Not much, but get it a little tight. Rotate the advance, wait for the spark. So we can actually go a little bit more here. I want this to fire when that advance is fully out. So we're going to advance this a smidge more. Snug this down. Snug the other one down. Did I go too far? Yeah. Too far. So let's come back a hair. Now I'm just past where I need to be. Hey! Sorry, dogs are going ape shite. Now when I move the advance, I'm rotating, 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 rotating. Okay, so we're a smidge past. It's definitely easier to use a test light. I'm just trying to get a rough fire on this. We're not riding it today. So all we're going for is 1, to make sure it sparks, which it is, and 2, try and see if we can get this thing to run on its own. So key's still on. Crank this back one more time. And that's firing at the end of the stroke. So I'm going to tweak this one more 1/8 smidge back on the ignition plate. It's just before the very end, which is okay. So we'll go to there, snug down again. Crank it up. Good. Should be good enough to run. Not optimal, not ideal. We will retime this perfectly, but right now, I just want to hear this thing run under its own power. Let's go back to the other side. Since we have it rough timed, if we look at the actual spark plugs under load here, you'll get a nice bright spark. Hopefully this will show up. Let's see what's happening here. Whole lot of sparkies. Exactly what you want. So I'm gonna put the timer plug back in for now. I will, once we get it fired up, like I said, and ready to run, I don't mind adjusting timing. That's kind of one of those things you're gonna have to do anyway. You can static time it perfect right now. I'm impatient and I don't know where my test light is at the moment, so we're gonna hold off on that. Not the right way to do this, but I know this should be close enough to fire up and run. And let this idle for a minute. We're good. That's the goal for tonight. My parents are coming over. I'm running out of time, so I'm kind of scrambling to try and get the rest of this done, but let me throw the timing plug back in. I'll get the plugs threaded in, and we're getting spark. Now, if we just add some fuel to the mix, in theory, as long as that float's not sticking on the carb and leaks all over the place, should be able to go pop, 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 pop. Under the cylinders. Now we got nice spark, spark, spark into the actual motor. And we need our little plug, which I hate getting started. And that time it goes first try. So that's cool. Good enough for now. That should work. I'll put one more bolt on this primary for now. Yeah, that's the foot peg bolt. We'll hold off on that. I'm also worried about what's gonna rattle off the bench if we do fire this up. So let's start moving some things central. The responsible thing to do here would be to clean up all of this stuff right now. So now we have carb hooked up, carb, spark, compression, roughly timed. We should be pretty much there minus the exhaust. So let's throw the pipes on, I guess. This is gonna need an adjustment anyway, but let me throw some pipes on, I guess. Oh, I don't remember if this clears. I might have hooked the brake linkage up too preemptively. Yeah, I did. That's swell. Okay, let's see what I can do with the exhaust here. Onto the exhaust. A couple quick issues that I ran into. I hooked the brake linkage up last night. I can't get this bolt out with that connected. Unless maybe I can pop these 7/16 out and that might give me enough room. We'll see. I can cheat, it's close, so. Let's see. Come on. Come on. Oh, you're so close. This is not the right way to do this. There we go. It's also not going to be any fun trying to put this back together. Okay, we already have the exhaust gaskets still hooked up on this motor. So we're going to start with the front one just so I can try and button up the rest of this. Exhaust gaskets are still in. You got 2 half-inch bolts on the studs up here. So we're gonna rip these off real quick. Maybe we only have one. Shit, lost one. Oh well. Okay, now we'll snake this guy up and in. In my experience, Evos tend to go a little bit easier. Terrible view for you guys. Where else can I put you? We'll try this. If you fall over, so be it. Now you're in the service cart on top of my sockets, but get this in and onto one of these flanges. Try and get the flange seated. Come on. Actually, try and get this lower bolt started first, because that's the tightest of them. It does not fit, but that's what hammers are for. I wouldn't do that to my own bike, but oh well, Justice doesn't watch these. All right, now I like getting the base started first on this one because it kind of just lands roughly where the exhaust flange needs to be. I'm gonna snug this up, and now I'm over both studs. Once you're over both studs, it will kind of stay. I have one of our fine thread exhaust bolts here. I don't know where the other one is. Maybe it's in the bin. But we'll at least get this kind of snugged down. I have more 5/16 bolts in back. Then I'll move around to the back side and do the same thing. You gotta tighten the lower. You gotta tighten the sprocket cover. Didn't forget. Now for the rear. Let me show you what we got going here. Same thing, this one we got a T-bolt here and then a lock nut. And when we put this all together the first time, that stud's gonna drop through a bracket that's welded onto the frame down here. Here, by my thumb. I don't wanna move you guys too much because you haven't fallen over yet. And then same deal, press the pipe up into the flange. And this one's kind of the opposite. I started with the rear here, or I started with the rear mount on the front. I do actually like starting with the front on the back pipe, just because I'm gonna drop a million things everywhere. But we'll get this top one started. A couple threads is all we need right now. There's a surprising amount of clearance in terms of getting these on and off. And being an Evo, you get two studs. If you have an iron head, you have pinch clamps, kind of like the panhead style. And if you have a shovel head, you get one crappy exhaust mount. So if you're doing this on an Evo, a lot more forgiving. Consider yourself spoiled. If you're doing this on a shovel head, you have one. Make sure as hell that the rest of your frame mount brackets are structural and sound. Okay, I have had and seen my chopper is one of those. The mounts were not hooked up correctly. The exhaust rattled around and it literally rattled right through the head. On an Evo, 2 bolt mounts are cool. Okay, and this is the big one that I probably don't have the socket out for. What size are you? 5/8? I'm gonna snug up the rear, not completely, but closer, like so. Then I need my 1/2 incher, and I'm gonna need to find a bolt. The top one started too. I don't need a 5/8 there. Back to your 1/2 inch. I'm only gonna get the accessible ones for right now. Back mount over here is roughly hooked up. We got it through the back side, kind of close. Just trying to get it roughly mocked up. There's our front top. And we'll just tighten this one down. Some idiot used too big of a bolt on the back. So 5/8 on this back flange, I can only do a 1/4 turn at a time. That's all right. Sorry about that. I turned the camera off because we were talking about other stuff that you guys don't need to hear about. So here's where we're at. Exhaust is now tightened down. I snugged up the 5/8 mount and sprocket cover. This top exhaust is accessible on this set of pipes. We're kind of resting on the frame right there, but I don't. Those are things we can adjust later. But these are tightened-ish. Open end wrench fits through the front of the frame rails. Same thing on the rear. Snugged these up. Got the bolt into the bracket that's welded onto the frame. So now we have exhaust. We have timing-ish. No fuel, but carb is on. Let's pour some gas in this thing and see if she wants to start. And rattle all of my tools off of the bench. Let me throw all of this stuff into the brand new magnetic tray I got. I think that counts as cleaning. I don't know how strong that is or how well that's gonna hold up when we get to pour some gas in this old turd. But, well, do we be nice and put new gas in, or should we try it with some really shitty old gas? That's the next question on the list. I can get this to fit over the carb here. When in doubt, spit on it. The internet's watching. We don't have time for this. There's probably 100 people that might see this at some point and will end up very disappointed. All right, I'm gonna wrestle this on. We'll be back in a minute. That felt really good. Okay, let's rethink this. It's very close, but this line's a little dry rotted. So let's stretch it out. Can I bill him for missing skin? The little nipple on that is pretty sharp, so be careful if you're doing what I just did. Feels really good when you cut your hand open while covered in gasoline too. Stupid, stupid, stupid. We're gonna run out of gas on this pretty quick, but hopefully that'll get into the carb. If we drain this bottle all the way, this is not new gas. Last time this gas was used was when we fired up the iron head. Now, what I'm gonna do before we go any further and try and start this, one, this needs more gas. We're already down to here. Two, we're gonna look into the carb and crank this over and try and see if we can get some squirts on the accelerator pump. And 3 squirts in. There we go, nice big shot. It's a brand new motor, so I'm gonna potentially flood it. Choke is actually staying up for right now. Then I'm gonna come to this side and see if this thing will start. Let's, we're in gear, so you want to take it out of gear for now. Back in first. Second. Then I'm gonna jack this up just a little bit more. Get it off the bench and clear. And double check to make sure this chain's not gonna hit anything. Might drag on the frame a little bit, but that's just fine. Okay, one for good luck, and let's see what happens here. And we're out of gas. Okay, so that fired up extremely well. Definitely some clickety-clackety in the valve train. Now here is where I'm getting nervous, not nervous per se, because I know that the oil pump is working, but this is a dry motor. I primed it up to here. I did not prime it enough to get all the way up to the top of the rockers. So what I'm gonna do now is, one, fill this back up. Two, we're gonna flip the seat forward. I didn't put the back bolt in, so we can just do this. Then we're gonna open up the oil tank, drop the cap like I just did, grab a little flashlight, and we are going to watch to make sure we are getting oil flowing back into this. So that was about, I don't know, 20-30 seconds of run time. But damn, that fired up way quicker than expected. Evo Sporty, she fired up and ran. So that's a win in my book. Where we left off, I said I was gonna fill up the oil. So I did that. We added the last half quart. So this is a very small oil tank. This only takes about 2.5 quarts. Maybe 3 on a good day. We are to the bottom of the threads on the fill. It fired up, started right up, but we ran out of gas. So this gas bottle, way clearer than it was from April or May's gas. Clear, relatively new. This is less than a month old. Still hooked up. We're not overflowing on the CV. So that's good. When we fired this up last time, a little clattery on the top end. Way clatterier than I would like it to be. But a fresh motor, fresh rebuild. So oil travel, in terms of the path of oil, comes from the tank, goes down the feed, up underneath the sprocket cover to the bottom of the pump, on the feed of the pump. The pump then pumps it up through the motor. We cranked this over dry with the oil filter off, up through, so the pump pumps fluid up to the filter. Filter's hooked up now. We pre-filled that, so there's extra oil in the filter. Then it needs to then travel all the way around through the motor up to the top end. We have not gotten oil to the top end yet, which makes me a little bit nervous, just because this is exactly what we ran into last time. It wasn't oiling the top end, and bottom end was solid. Hence the grenading of the cylinders when the oil wasn't going up to the top. Now, we ran this for about 15 seconds, so in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that much time for oil to pump itself through, cycle it through. Then there's a vent and a return. The vent will bubble out all of the air. It just takes a while for it to get back to the tank. However, it fired up super easy. It ran well. We're about to fire this thing up again and then let this cycle through. If this is a catastrophic mistake or I'm doing something totally wrong because it's an Evo, let me know. But my understanding, we need oil pressure down to the pump, up to the filter. I know we have that because we cranked it over first. Then it needs to pump the rest of the oil up to the top end. It's hydraulic lifters. We need to get oil from the bottom, from the tank to the bottom of the motor, up into the lifters, pump up the lifters. Then the valve clickety-clackety should turn itself down. We don't have enough run time on this yet. So Dottie's inside right now, I think refilling a cocktail. She's gonna come back out. I'm gonna give her the camera. If there's oil squirting up here, then we'll let it run. I don't mind a little bit of noise if I know that it's getting oil pressure. But again, this didn't work last time, so I'm a little on the apprehensive side. Refilled the oil tank, which was substantially like a full quart lower than it was yesterday, which means oil is sumping down and through. Makes me feel a little bit better about it. So if Dottie comes out in the next minute or two, I'll give her the camera. If not, I'll throw you guys up on the tripod. We're gonna try this all over again. Fingers crossed. Hope nothing blows up. I'm impatient, she's taking too long. So we'll give this a squirt or two. We got fresh fuel, fresh oil, and then I need a light. This is not a good light for this, but that's what I have. So I'm gonna go with that until I can find my little pen light. I lose these things all the time. I was about to say a bad word, but I lose these all the time. We're gonna give this a shot. Here recording, come on over. Cap is off on the oil tank, so I can kind of check to see. Our feed and our vent comes here. How do I have this laid out? I don't know. If I don't see bubbles in the oil tank, we'll shut it down one more time. One more good luck squirt. See what we got for choke here. A little gold. More choke required. Get the Instagram video. shut it down because we are spraying oil from one of these lines here. Oh, is it the feed? No, not the feed, obviously. The feed goes down. Spraying oil from one of the returns that I never hooked a connector up. I'm gonna fire this right back up one more time, maybe. Then I'll figure out exactly where this is leaking. So we're gonna shut this down tonight. I've been drinking way too much to be thinking about motor things. Where we left off last time, I'm gonna bring you guys a little bit closer. We are spraying oil from the return, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not mad about it, but we are definitely leaking. Here's our vent, this thin hose right here. Here's our return. Apparently I decided that it was a really good idea not to hook up a return clamp. So our return comes through here. This is what is leaking. Here's our feed, here's our return, and then the vent loops around up to the top. I didn't hook up a fitting on the return, which results in this puke. So, foolish me. It is what it is. Very clattery on the valve train. That makes me nervous, but if I'm puking oil out of the return, it is making its way back to the tank. We're gonna have to look into that a little bit further. That'll wrap this video up. Tomorrow, now that it runs and starts extremely easy, we will dive into that a little bit further tomorrow. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Where?
Right in that tank. So if I do this, it's gonna fire up. It's gonna be loud for a second. Return is working, it's just the hose clamp that I forgot to put on, so it's leaking a little bit, but we are getting a big old spray right through here. Valve train will quiet down once it pumps up. Fingers crossed, if not we got a bigger issue, but that's a different issue because now we have oil flow. Catch you on the next one.